What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the Draft Hub. Today, we're going to be looking at a breakout candidate from all 32 NFL teams. Now, this is something that I've been doing for the last few years. I've been pretty accurate with this so far. I mean, it's not really that hard to determine breakout players for the most part, especially when you're looking at some guys that are relatively stars already that may be underwhelmed in their rookie season or whatnot. So, the way that this works is breakout candidates are going to be either rookies, second-year players, or maybe even some third-year players. We're not going to talk about guys that are in their seventh or eighth year in the NFL, and then I'm just trying to predict. I'm trying to be Confucius and predict something crazy that might not happen. But we're just going to take a look at first, second, or third-year players that I think are going to break out in a big way in 2025. And of course, we're going in alphabetical order of teams. So first, I have a pretty obvious choice here. I have Marvin Harrison Jr. for the Arizona Cardinals. Marvin Harrison Jr. didn't have a bad rookie season by any stretch of the imagination, maybe just a tad underwhelming. I think he really needs to be integrated in that Arizona Cardinals offense a little bit more. Started to turn it on at the back end of the year last year. I believe he finished with 847 receiving yards, something like that. I'm thinking this year he breaks out in a big way. I'm thinking 1,300, 1,400 yards, comes close to leading the league in catches. He needs to become a focal point. Even in an offense that has Trey McBride, he needs to become the focal point of this Arizona Cardinals offense. Then the Atlanta Falcons, you have Michael Penix Jr., maybe another pretty obvious candidate here, but I just think we weren't even scratching the surface of what Michael Penix Jr. can do. I liked what I saw from the small sample size that we got of last year. It seems like we're going into this year with this fully being Michael Penix Jr.'s team. He's got certainly an array of wide receivers and weapons to work with. Drake London broke out in a big way last year. We're still waiting on that Kyle Pitts big-time breakout. Bijan Robinson is blooming into one of, if not the best young running backs in football. So I'm thinking Michael Penix Jr. in a weak division will lead the Atlanta Falcons to the cusp of a NFC South title berth potentially. For the Baltimore Ravens here, I have TJ Tampa. This was an underrated draft pick by the Baltimore Ravens last year, and Tampa didn't get to play that much in his rookie season. He was injured for quite a bit of it, but he's a player that I think is going to add a lot of value to this secondary of the Baltimore Ravens, especially after losing Brandon Stevens in free agency. Adding guys like Malachi Starks to this secondary, you're essentially adding TJ Tampa to this secondary again because he played so little last year. But I think he's going to break out in a big way, and I think he's going to firmly challenge for that cornerback 2 spot right away. And for the Buffalo Bills, I have Keon Coleman. Coleman didn't have a terrible rookie season, but I think we were expecting a little bit more. We expected a Keon Coleman wide receiver 1 breakout, and we really got that with Khalil Shakir. But I think Coleman was like a perfect wide receiver 2 complement to him. Josh Allen just doesn't hone in on one target. That's the thing. Coleman, Shakir, Mac Hollins was there too, Dawson Knox, Dalton Kincaid. Just a little bit of everything. He spreads the ball around pretty evenly. So we weren't going to see, 10 to 12 targets a game from Keon Coleman, but I do think he had a solid rookie year. I think the expectations are just a touch lower this year, especially after adding Josh Palmer to the mix. Excuse me. But I think Keon Coleman is going to break out. I think he's going to be close to 1,000 yards, maybe even close to 10 touchdowns, especially with that massive frame that he has. Trevin Wallace is another player that I think is going to take a firm step forward in year 2. Kind of really no one in his way to be that inside linebacker, that number 1 inside linebacker for the most part. I believe it's him and Josie Jewell have the 2 top linebacker spots for the Carolina Panthers. A high draft pick. I believe he was drafted in the 3rd round last year. Someone who got drafted not off of his, 6'1", 244 is pretty elite size if you ask me, at least from a weight standpoint, but incredible athleticism for someone that's almost 250 pounds. I think he's going to be fantastic in a more expanded role. Wasn't great in coverage last year, but that's actually really one of the reasons why he got drafted so highly. So I'm expecting that after the transition from the college game to the pro game, hopefully he'll take a massive step forward in that coverage aspect. And we have our first rookie on the board here with the Chicago Bears. I have Kyle Monangai because I just don't know. I thought this was a very weird free agency and offseason for the Bears in one standpoint that I feel like the one thing that Ben Johnson was going to do, or at least the first thing he was going to do, was add a star running back. Andre Swift just, doesn't really do it for me. Roshan Johnson just doesn't really do it for me. I thought they were going to add a running back early in the draft. They didn't. They waited all the way until round 7, but they got Kyle Monangai, and I think Monangai is a fantastic player, never fumbled in his collegiate career. Just fantastic contact balance, a monster 5'9", 230-pound back. He's not going to wow you with his catching to break as that RB1 this season. And back-to-back rookies here for the Bengals. They have Dylan Fairchild there. I think Cordell Volson has, kind of run his course as a starting member of the interior of the offensive line for the Cincinnati Bengals. I think Fairchild is someone that was kind of a steal in round 3 for the Cincinnati Bengals. I thought he was someone that was going to go a little bit higher, maybe someone like a Tate Ratledge. But that whole interior of the Georgia Bulldogs offensive line last year was exceptional. They all got drafted in day 2. And I think Dylan Fairchild has a clear-cut opportunity to win the guard spot for the Cincinnati Bengals this offseason and just be a staple of this offensive line in front of Joe Burrow. For the Cleveland Browns, I have Michael Hall Jr., another player that, I feel like kind of got lost in the shuffle, was highly drafted last year, got a little bit lost in the shuffle. I believe he was on IR for a little bit as well, but I think there is, especially behind Mason Graham, I feel like there's really not much in terms of the interior of the defensive line. I think Michael Hall Jr. and Mason Graham next to each other offers a really awesome young 1-2 punch of strong, athletic, young defensive tackles. And I think especially with the addition of Mason Graham next to him, I think Michael Hall Jr. can break out in a big way. Not a big defensive tackle. I believe at 6'2", 285 pounds, more of that just sheer power. So it's going to be interesting to see how these two defensive tackles, who are a little bit on the undersized side, just kind of deal with that pure athleticism and that pure power. For the Dallas Cowboys, I have Maris Liufau here because I think Liufau, I don't think his numbers kind of indicate how good he was. If you look from a pure PFF grade standpoint, he was pretty abysmal last year in his rookie season, kind of maybe taking a little bit more of a role than he initially was supposed to after Demarion Overshown did get injured. So, I think he was kind of thrusted into that starting spot a little faster than initially anticipated. But I think Liufau is a really good player who has phenomenal athleticism for the linebacker position. I think he's going to settle into his own in year 2, and he's going to break out and be much better, at least from a grade standpoint, that he was in 2024. For the Denver Broncos, I had Marvin Mims Jr. I mean, we saw it a little bit towards the end of last year, where Mims Jr. is really just a human highlight reel. This guy needs to be used more in this Denver Broncos offense, not just a deep threat. He is certainly a player that, could take a wide receiver screen 60 yards to the house. He's dynamic with the ball in his hands, and I've kind of been waiting on a breakout for him for 2 years now, and we kind of saw a little bit of it last year, and I think he's fully going to get integrated into this Denver Broncos offense this year, even with the additions of Pat Bryant, Evan Ingram, and I think that Marvin Mims has firmly cut out a spot, at least as a wide receiver 2 or 3 for the Denver Broncos here. For the Detroit Lions, we have Terrion Arnold, a player that kind of, the beginning of the year was like, oh boy, this guy has bust written all over him. But he started to figure it out towards the end of the regular season last year, and I'm hoping that he can carry that over into 2025 because he is a phenomenal athlete. He's a phenomenal corner. It was just the defensive ideology was kind of going against his traditional play style. So I'm hoping, I don't know off the top of my head, I'm hoping this new defensive coordinator kind of caters a little bit more to Terrion Arnold because, man, his strengths are truly strong, and he's a phenomenal heady type of player. So I'm hoping that, with a little bit more of a catered defensive scheme, he could really break out into that first-round talent that he was last year. And for the Green Bay Packers, I have Lucas Van Ness here. I thought they were going to try and attack the edge rushing position a little bit earlier in the draft. I believe Baron Sorrell was their highest drafted defensive lineman, or at least edge. I think Van Ness, tough, because he was always going to be a projection player. In the NFL, he's going to be someone that has tremendous strength, has tremendous tools. He just has to put it all together. And now, after 2 seasons, we've seen glimpses, but we haven't seen, him actually fully take over. So I'm kind of hoping that he takes a step forward here. More mouths to feed sometimes to me kind of feels like it's a better potential for players to break out because the focus isn't solely on them. I feel like now the defensive line with the players that they have, the edge rushing positions with the players that they have, I feel like Van Ness could kind of break out in a little bit more of a pass rush centered role. He actually graded out pretty well as a run defender last year, so that's a plus part of his game that I truly didn't know about until I looked into the numbers. So hopefully he could, in a more limited role, he could kind of blossom into more of an all-around well player, if that makes sense to you guys. Another rookie here for the Houston Texans, I have Ariante Ursary for the Texans. I mean, I loved what they did in the draft, the Houston Texans. They didn't have a first round pick, or they traded out. They traded out of the first round, added a lot of day 2 picks. Got Jaden Noel, they got Jalen Noel, Jaden Higgins, they got Ariante Ursary. They traded up for Ariante Ursary, I believe. But man, this is going to be a player that I think you can put him anywhere on the offensive line. He's got an interesting build where I think he could play 4 out of the 5 offensive line spots, any guard position, any tackle position. Has experience at left and right tackle. Don't know where he's going to start, but all I know is if you trade up for a offensive tackle of Ursary's potential, he's going to start right away, and I think he's going to be a phenomenal player for them. For the Indianapolis Colts, I have A.D. Adonai Mitchell here. I think he can kind of separate himself from the lot. Great route runner, just couldn't really put it all together. Last year had a really disappointing year. I think he had like 300 receiving yards. I don't think he scored a touchdown. It just was a little bit disappointing, especially from a second-round wide receiver. But I feel like that wide receiver 2 role is kind of wide open where you have Pittman as the 1, but is he really the 1? Josh Downs as your slot, and then you have Alec Pierce, Adonai Mitchell kind of fighting it out for that other boundary wide receiver role. I think Mitchell's route running ability and his just overall speed and big playability, hopefully he can get on the same page to Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones, whoever winds up starting for the Indianapolis Colts. I feel like he's got way too much talent for just 300 receiving yards. Brenton Strange is going to be the pick for me for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, we saw it a little bit last year when Evan Ingram was injured, but Brenton Strange was, no pun intended, kind of a strange pick for me in the second round of the 2023 draft. We kind of saw glimpses of that talent that he truly possesses in 2024. And then I guess the Jacksonville Jaguars front office, head coaching, the staff truly does believe in him because after cutting Evan Ingram, they didn't really add, at least from a receiving tight end standpoint, they didn't add any receivers. So Brenton Strange is going to be the tight end 1 going forward. And I think he's got some real receiving chops that are quite underrated that I didn't at least see until looking at his highlights from last year. So I think Strange is a big breakout candidate in a wide open tight end room for the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Kansas City Chiefs, I have Xavier Worthy. Now, you might say, what are you talking about? Xavier Worthy was great down the stretch. It's true. He was great in the playoffs, but we saw glimpses and spurts of the big playability that he did possess. If the Kansas City Chiefs could just let Patrick Mahomes throw the ball deep down the field, like we saw with the last touchdown of the Super Bowl, where Patrick Mahomes just said, screw it, Worthy's down there somewhere, and aired it out like 75 yards down the field, and he scored a touchdown. I think we're going to see a lot more big playability, especially with Rashee Rice coming back fully healthy, Hollywood Brown coming back healthy. This is going to be a very, very speedy wide receiver core for the Kansas City Chiefs. Jalen Royals as well, drafted later on in the draft. This is going to be really exciting to see, and I think Worthy is going to lead the pack out of this wide receiver group. For the Raiders, I have Jackson Powers-Johnson. Now, the reason I have Jackson Powers-Johnson is because we're finally going to be able to see him in his most dominant form at the center position. Last year, he split about 800 snaps between the right guard position and the center role, and he was a beast as the center. I believe he was PFF's highest graded center when he played the center position. And he's just an absolute animal of a human being, and we are going to see him in his best position throughout. I was a huge fan of him last year. the first two picks for the Las Vegas Raiders last year were just home runs. Brock Bowers, Jackson Powers Johnson. I feel like he's going to break out in a big way, and he's going to firmly cement himself as a top 5 center in the NFL in year 2. You have Tarheeb still here for the Chargers, and you might say, yeah, he did break out last year. I think he's going to break out even more this year. I think we're looking at potentially one of the best young cornerbacks in football, because you look at last year, you looked at the cornerback room for the Chargers, and you're saying, wow, Tarheeb still, Christian Fulton, Cam Hart, like, what are we doing here, fellas? The Chargers were phenomenal on defense last year, and I think Tarheeb still was a huge reason why. I think he takes another step forward as that lead cornerback for the Chargers, and he breaks out in an even bigger way. I'm talking about Pro Bowl, All-Pro potential for Tarheeb still. For the Rams, I have Jordan Whittington here. I think that wide receiver 3 role is wide open. You have firmly cemented Puka Nacua as your 1, Devontae Adams as your 2. I feel like between Tutu Atwell and Jordan Whittington, we saw some glimpses last year of Whittington, a 6th-round rookie out of Texas last year. Showed some real flashes, especially when Cooper Kupp did get injured last year. He did get injured himself. So I believe while fully healthy, good run blocker as well. Just kind of one of those scrappy Rams do-it-all wide receivers. I think he's really like a watered-down Puka Nacua, and I think he can make a real impact as at splitting time as your wide receiver 3 or 4 for the LA Rams. The Miami Dolphins, Patrick Paul, didn't add a left tackle in free agency through a trade or through the draft. I feel like he was their 2nd-round pick last year. He learned from Teron Armstead, so there's got to be some value in that. Massive human being, 6'7", 330 pounds. Did get some playing time last year. It was pretty abysmal, but I don't think that is going to really kind of sway the way that I think here. I always say that the offensive line is the toughest position, any of the 5 positions, to translate from the college game to the NFL, and playing at Houston, a little bit of a tougher transition. The talent is there. The athleticism is there. I think Paul is going to be a fantastic player in due time. I think he needs refinement, but I think he's going to be a good player this year, and he's going to be their left tackle in the future. But the Minnesota Vikings have a pretty obvious choice here, J.J. McCarthy. Missed all of his rookie season. Don't think he was going to play that much to begin with Sam Darnold having a career year, but the Minnesota Vikings truly have made this offense so easy to succeed in so fast. You look at the wide receivers. You have Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson. They drafted Ty Felton. You have T.J. Hawkinson. They drafted Donovan Jackson in the 1st round. Their offensive line is firmly set. They signed Ryan Kelly and Will Fries from the Indianapolis Colts. They signed Jordan Mason to go with Aaron Jones. Maybe that you could say that is your weakest offensive spot so far, but man, it's going to be hard to ignore J.J. McCarthy in his rookie season, unless he's absolutely terrible, which I doubt. He's fantastic. He has a cannon of an arm, incredibly accurate. I think he's going to slot in, and he's going to be fantastic for the Minnesota Vikings. The New England Patriots, I have Keion White. Now, we saw a little bit of a breakout from Keion White earlier in the season, kind of fizzled out towards the end, but overall, one of PFF's strongest graded overall edge rushers or outside linebackers, whatever you would want to call him, was top 20 in run defending and was top 20 as a pass rusher. So I feel like he kind of slid a little bit under the radar, had 6 sacks credited to his name. Under PFF, had 5 credited to his name for ESPN. So do with that information what you will. Let's call it 5.5 right down the middle. But yeah, Keion White is someone that I think with more refinement, it was always going to be the refinement game for him. Drafted in the 2nd round in 2023, had a good rookie season, got better his 2nd year. I think we're going to break out in a big way in his 3rd year here in the NFL. The New Orleans Saints, Kool-Aid McKinstry here is going to be my pick. They lost Paulson Adebo in free agency. Alante Taylor is going to be your nickelback, and that kind of leaves the number 1 cornerback position wide open for 2nd-year player Kool-Aid McKinstry. Was pretty good last year, 9 pass deflections and an interception last year in more of a breakout role once Marshawn Lattimore was traded. But yeah, I think he's going to break out in a big way. He was always a really strong candidate to be a good cornerback coming out of that Nick Saban Alabama defense. You're always going to, have the one-up to other DBs, in my opinion. But McKinstry is just a really strong player with a great frame, a great head on his shoulders. I think he's going to be fine as your cornerback one in New Orleans. For the New York Giants, I have Andrew Phillips. And really, this is only off the fact that I feel like not a lot of people were talking about Andrew Phillips last year. Firmly one of the best nickelbacks in football in his rookie season. I think he breaks out in a big way in year two. He was just such a strong run defender from the slot. Really good in coverage as well. I believe he ranked in the top 17 in both categories per PFF. I think he breaks out in a big way. He makes a Pro Bowl or an All-Pro this season. For the New York Jets, I have Malachi Corley, and I am a New York Jet fan, and unfortunately. And Malachi Corley, I expected big things as the first pick of round 3 in 2024. Expected big things, just never materialized. Anytime that he touched the ball, and it was an extremely rare occurrence last year, I believe he had 5 touches. But he made the most out of those 5 touches. He had a end-around 19-yard rushing touchdown called back due to a holding call. The flashes were there in the very small glimpses that we got. I'm hoping under a new coaching staff and with a wide open wide receiver room where we really don't have a firmly cemented wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3, I feel like Corley is going to kind of step up and be that guy that can get 500, 600, 700 yards out of the slot for the New York Jets. I'm hoping and I'm praying. For the Philadelphia Eagles, I have Moro Ajomo here, and Ajomo was a extremely strong pass rusher through his grades last year. Fell quite far under the radar, I would like to say, for as good as he was. And we saw it in the Super Bowl as well. This is a 7th round player we're talking about here from 2023. Is firmly cemented as the starting defensive end for the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm expecting big things. The talent has always been there. The production has always been there. It just hasn't been in a consistent snap count. But this year, I feel like Ajomo is going to take a big step forward as that guy that kind of comes out of nowhere as a 7th round player and makes a true impact. For the Philadelphia Steagles. For the Philadelphia Steagles, yeah, all right. For the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm going to leave that in there, by the way. That's hilarious. I'm going to have Roman Wilson here. Didn't play a single snap in his rookie season. Dealt with a ankle injury and a hamstring injury, I want to say, throughout the entire year. Yeah, kind of the same thing with Malachi Corley. I'm going to say the same thing with Roman Wilson. He just didn't really get a chance, and I feel like in a wide open, besides for maybe Calvin Austin and DK Metcalf, it's wide open for targets behind them. So I think Roman Wilson is going to break out in a big way. And Robert Woods, but Robert Woods is on the tail end of his career at this point. For the San Francisco 49ers, I have Renardo Green. Now, after losing Charvarius Ward, I feel like Renardo Green is going to step into that cornerback 1 role. He had an interception, he had 5 pass deflections last year, played quite a bit of football. So I think he's going to firmly step into that CB1 role. I mean, you're looking at a very, very young secondary. They drafted Upton Stout as well. They have Jair Brown. They lost Tanaloa Hufanga through free agency. This secondary needs a alpha male to step up, and I think Renardo Green is going to be that guy that takes that next step forward. For the Seattle Seahawks, I have Tyrese Knight. Again, just another player that had an okay rookie season. Graded out poorly as a coverage linebacker, but as a run stopper and as a pass rusher, he was actually quite good. I'm hoping that he could develop a little bit more of that coverage part of his game. But if not, he's a super strong run defender and a good pass rusher from the off-ball linebacker position. For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I have Shiloh Sanders, and I'm not trolling you guys here. From what we're hearing from Tampa Bay Buccaneers camp and from the reports, is that Shiloh Sanders is clearly stepping out as a strong candidate from the safety position. And really, outside Antoine Winfield Jr., there is a path for Shiloh Sanders to play a lot of football very early on in his career. He signed a 3-year, $2.5 million contract. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers definitely see a future with Shiloh Sanders. And honestly, I'm kind of rooting for the guy. I do hope that, he went undrafted. A lot of people kind of were like, oh, he's terrible in coverage, so he offers no value. He's a strong run defender and a good blitzer. And there's a path for him to play some football very early on in his career as an undrafted player. J.C. Latham is my pick for the Tennessee Titans because you might say, wow, how is he going to break out? He played over 1,000 snaps his rookie season. Very true, but most of them, actually all of them, were at the left tackle position. Now that Dan Moore Jr. has been signed, they're going to slide J.C. Latham over back to his more natural position of right tackle. And I think that he's going to be dominant from the right tackle position. A lot of people say, oh, what's the big deal? There is a massive difference between playing left tackle and right tackle in the NFL. And if you can't understand that, then I don't know if you truly know ball or not. But massive difference between the two. J.C. Latham is a natural right tackle. That's what his strengths play to. I think he's going to break out in a big way in 2025. And then finally here I have Jerzon Newton. And this is a favorite of mine. Personally, I thought Jerzon Newton was the best defensive lineman from the 2024 draft class. I will die on that hill. But had an okay rookie season, graded out pretty poorly as a run defender and as a pass rusher. But, spotty playing time. Now that Jonathan Allen is gone, I feel like there is a clear path for him to start and for him to play next to Daron Payne. And I think that he is going to, where you have Payne is more of that run defending oriented player. Jerzon Newton is someone who did have double-digit sacks his last year in college. He's going to be able to focus on purely pass rushing. Had a 67.3 grade last year as a pass rusher, so not as terrible as I initially painted the picture, but could get better, and I think he will with more consistent snaps and more consistent playing time. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. There are my 2025 breakout candidates for all 32 teams of the NFL in the NFL. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Please leave a like. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't and you enjoyed this content. Thank you guys so much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope I see you in the next one.